All right. Well, then we're going to skip ahead. I'll do one more chapter, and then I'll open it up to questions, if that's cool with you guys. Okay, so if you want to turn to chapter 8 on page 99, I'll pick it up from there. This is not a chapter that requires a great deal of context. It's just some stuff has happened in between. That's why I figured it's a good one to read. So chapter 8. 5 hooded figures stood at the points of a large red pentagram in a room lit by black candles. Each of the 5 raised their hands and bowed in turn, chanting in an ancient and vile tongue known only to the mad and depraved. As their unholy song rose in volume, reaching its abhorrent crescendo, an unnatural wind began to blow. Soon the room around them shook as fit to tear itself apart, and the pentagram burst into flames. At its center, a swirling void appeared, along with the hum of 1,000 buzzing flies. The void pushed against itself, growing and stretching, eventually taking on the shape of a large, pulsing caul. A hand, a huge hand with giant talons, tore its way through the sack, bursting forth with a scream that blew out the candles and knocked the hooded figures from their feet. What emerged was a creature from Nightmare itself, 10 feet tall, massively muscled, with scaly purple skin and leather wings. Its red eyes had hourglass pupils like those of a goat, though its maw resembled a horse with several rows of jagged, sharp teeth, which reeked of rotten flesh. Sharp spines jutted from its arms and legs, and its mane was composed of braided snakes. It surged with power and hatred, slamming with all its might against the prison surrounding it. "Who dares summon Urg the demon?" it screamed, echoing throughout the chamber. "Speak now and die 1,000 agonizing deaths." The figure at the head of the pentagram spoke in a quiet tone. "I, under my own power and the terms of the Pax Infernum, do so summon. I shall now invoke the 1,000 dark rites by which you are bound. First—" "Oh, blast it all, will you hurry this nonsense up?" Otto shouted, throwing back his hood. "I didn't invite you all here to listen to superstitious mumbo-jumbo all night." "But Otto," the figure said in a more nasal voice, "I'm just getting to the coolest part. I spent like 5 hours memorizing rhyming couplets." Otto narrowed his eyes. "Tim, end it now, or I launch this entire room, and all your gothic paraphernalia with it, into space." "Fine, fine," Tim sighed. He threw back his hood and looked to the demon. "Urg, you good? Can I let you out?" Urg smiled. "Yeah, man, sorry about that." The flaming pentagram dissipated as Otto tapped the remote and brought up the lights. All 6 figures fell into step as the maintenance bots cleaned up the wreckage. As far as Otto was concerned, the fact that it was so messy would have been enough to deter him from any interest in the dark arts, even if it weren't total bunk. He leaned in towards the necromancer. "I don't know why you invite that demon. Last time he ate several of my maintenance bots, and the station stunk like an abattoir for a week." Tim ran his fingers through his curly beard and whispered, "Urg lives on the dread plane of greed, so you know he's loaded. Besides, he's the worst player I know." Tim chuckled quietly as Otto shrugged. "And seriously, Otto, don't call me Tim anymore. It's Necromortius, master of the underworld and what lies beyond." Otto rolled his eyes. "You couldn't be trying harder there if you called yourself Count Evil from Evilsville, but very well, Necromortius it is." "Lord Ironmask finds the name tasteful and understated," said another hooded figure. Otto led the group into his conference room, where a large circular table had been placed along with 6 seats. Scrap stood in the center, wearing a black bow tie and vest over a white shirt, as well as a translucent green visor on his head. He was shuffling cards faster than the eye could see. Fix-It and the other maintenance bots floated around the room with trays of sandwiches, drinks, and cigars. Scrap then laid out a deck of cards on the table. "Gentlemen," he said, a hint of reverb added to his voice, "Supervillain Poker Night on the Quadrilateral of Doom is open for business." The tradition went back as far as supervillainy itself. Villains, by their nature, like to prove their superiority, and even better, over one another. The problem was, being dangerous, violent, and amoral individuals, this tended to lead to massive infighting, which only made the agents of the law and justice's jobs far easier. Thus, a compact was reached amongst the big villains, such as Living Labyrinth, Attila the Mummy, and Amadeus Ex Machina, that masters of evil would gather together from time to time for a game of poker to work out their differences as well as simply enjoy themselves. Though years had passed and faces changed, the tradition carried on, with new villains trying every year to gain access to an elite spot at the table. Necromortius had secured his due to his father, who was the former high priest of some cult or other, and he had invited Otto. The two met in their college days back when Necromortius was still Tim the Necromancer, a moniker which did not admittedly inspire much terror. While both shared an interest in chess and evil, they found their styles too different to work in tandem. The one time they tried, Tim's zombie horde devoured Otto's cyber brain prototype, while Otto refused to stop pointing out logical inconsistencies in Tim's magic rituals. Even though Otto was not initially inclined to accept the invite, believing that the only reputation worth having was one carved across a swath of destruction across continents, he came to enjoy the meetings, pitting his wits against foes who were nearly his equals. Around the table, the remaining figures removed their hoods, which Tim's mother had made and insisted they all wear. There was Necromortius himself, whose visage did not, other than the black robe inscribed with blood runes and laced with animal skeletons, portray an appropriately villainous image. He was lean, with light brown skin and curly hair, which was neither red nor black, but swirled between the two, his hazel eyes betraying a touch more sensitivity than Otto thought a villain's should. Next to him was Lord Ironmask, Iron Ruler of the Empire of Ironvania. Draped in blue and gold kingly robes, on which was emblazoned his royal crest, an iron gauntlet crushing the earth, Lord Ironmask was a masterclass in grabbing subtlety by the short hairs and tossing it into an active volcano. Under his robes, he was covered from head to toe in an iron suit of armor, topped with a large six-pointed iron crown, and he drank mead flecked with iron shavings from an iron goblet. Throwing his arms behind his head and his feet on the table was Drew Lupine, the werewolf king of New Orleans. Large, muscular, and hairy, even in human form, with a scruffy beard and a touch bald on top, Drew wore an expensive silk shirt with the top buttons undone over a pair of worn jeans and work boots. He gestured towards the maintenance bots, who brought sandwiches directly up to his mouth. Next, Erg took up 2 seats and picked his teeth with Fix-It's propeller blade. And finally, cool and with a hint of disdain for them all, was Sagittarius Jones, the new leader of the legendary Zodiac Gang. In truth, it was a welcome change from the previous regime. Aquarius had turned the gang into what many in the villain community referred to as a hippie cult, and spent much of the organization's vast fortune on frivolous activities like creating a fleet of finger-painted school buses to distribute satirical pictures of public figures, spiking the ocean with LSD to free the minds of sea creatures, and creating the world's largest sitar to trance humanity into a peaceful state, right up until Jake Indestructible threw him into a vat of boiling granola. Capricorn seemed to be on the same path before he died of an accidental fall down an elevator shaft, followed by an accidental firebombing and several accidental arrows to the chest. Sagittarius was moving the gang in the direction of organized crime, and he looked the part. Tall, handsome, and dark-skinned, he wore a simple yet stylish black suit, fedora, and shades. He took a cigar from the tray and draped a cane across his legs as he sat down. "How do I know the robot's not going to cheat for Von Trapezoid?" Jones asked, lowering his shades and eyeing Scrap. Otto and Tim snickered. Tim slowly looked at the man. "You must be new," he said. "I despise all biological life forms equally. I can assure you I have no concern for the outcome of this game, nor my master's desire to win it." "It's true," Drew said, grabbing a beer from a passing tray. "That's why I always come out on top. If you know what I mean," he ribbed both Erg and Ironmask. "I'm afraid I don't," Scrap said. "Your reference was obviously too opaque for my robot sensibilities. Perhaps if you explained it in detail or provided charts." "Your machine is most flippant," Lord Ironmask said to Otto, crossing his arms. "Lord Ironmask would have a servant flogged and tossed to the iron wolves for such obedience." "Like the 3 dealers you executed when we played at your castle?" Necromortius asked. "Poor guys, and those poor wolves in heavy armor." "They failed to shuffle in such a way as to deliver Lord Ironmask the straight flushes he deserves by divine right," Ironmask shouted, slamming a mailed fist on the table. "Scrap is a valuable cohort," Otto said, uncharacteristically civil, "and his services are worth his wit, however tedious it might be. That said, these are my guests, and they are to be treated respectfully. Am I understood, Scrap?" "Perfectly, sir," the robot said, his usual sarcasm gone from his voice as he shuffled one more time. Erg burst out in laughter, banging the table and knocking over everyone's chips. "Oh, I get it! Come out on top! That's rich!" Scrap blinked, his loyalty and derision directives at war with each other. The game is 7-card stud, Joker's Wild. Scrap shot the cards to players. Oh, we're not playing Hold'em, Lupin whined, his mouth full of sandwich. I refuse to allow that bastardized children's version of poker on my station, Otto scoffed. When we meet at the whiskey distillery you call a lair, we can play by your rules. Now ante up. Lupin shrugged, tossing his chips to the center and picking up his cards. The group of them looked around the table, searching for weaknesses and attempting to make the others crack. Otto squinted, weighing the odds based on the cards he could see. Call, he said icily. Curse these! Lord Iron Mask snarled, shaking his fists and throwing his cards away. Then he attempted to compose himself. Iron Mask calls. Necromortius sighed and dropped his cards. Fold. Lupin sniffed the air and smirked. Call. Call, said Sagittarius, his voice and expression unreadable. Hey guys, said Urg, who held his cards backwards. Are twos good? The game continued on into the night. The first few hands, Sagittarius and Lupin were in the lead, with Otto breaking just above even and Necromortius slightly below. He had folded from the outset of every hand. Lord Iron Mask had lost everything and bought back in, while Urg had bought back in 3 times and twice during one hand. They took a short recess while Scrap adjourned to the room for a new deck, Lord Iron Mask having incinerated the last one. Lord Iron Mask still does not see why kings do not have his face on them. Iron Mask is a king. Maybe if Iron Mask didn't throw tantrums every time he lost, he wouldn't have to wonder about it, Sagittarius said, blowing smoke rings and looking away. Iron Mask stood, charging his energy gauntlets. You dare insult Lord Iron Mask? Whoa, guys, calm down, said Necromortius, putting his hands up. How about we catch up instead of fighting? Like, for instance, I recently had one of those magic TVs that lets you see spectral actors installed in my crypt. The ghouls really seem to like it. What about you, Sag? Sagittarius glared. I had a state senator thrown out of a window last week in front of his kids. Is that what you're looking for? Necromortius choked for a second on his drink. I guess? Lord Iron Mask is having a new statue forged in his eternal glory. It will take only 20 years and perhaps the lives of 1,000 servants. Are 3s good? Urg asked, apparently having forgotten to discard his hand. I just made a new batch of Lupinbrow, Lupin said, referring to his homemade beer. We're down to a 30% chance of lycanthropy with every gulp. I like those odds, said Urg. What about you, Otto? Necromortius asked. You're oddly quiet tonight. Otto looked up distractedly. Yes, well, you all heard about the incident at the UN. I'm trying to put some new plans in motion, but nothing certain yet. Drew Lupin sniffed at him. Nice try, Goggles, but there's something you're not telling us. Otto looked over at Necromortius. Timothy, will you tell this lecherous clod to keep his nose away from me? I'm not the sort who hides behind subterfuge. Scrap returned with the new deck, now covered in flame-retardant chemicals. Tim looked at Otto and scratched his chin. No, I think Drew's right. You're acting funny. Otto grunted as he picked up his cards. Very well, you gaggle of fishwives. If you simply must know, I have been seeing someone. Now can we play? He picked up his cards, shuffling through them and preparing for a new hand, when he noticed the still silence of the others, their eyes falling on him like a bag of anvils from Jupiter. What? You're seeing someone? Like dating? Necromortius squeaked. Finally built yourself a love bot, eh? Lupin laughed, slapping Urg on the back, who spit his drink all over the table. For your information, it's Esmeralda Santa Monica. We've been together about 3 months now. Drew leaned forward and nodded. Wait, the thief? Tall, leggy brunette? I asked her out once. Pretty sure she stole my house afterwards. Does she, have a sister? Asked Necromortius, obscuring his mouth as he did so. She does, but I am assured she is horrible, as Otto said. I am also told she has fatty thighs, which I assume is a bad thing for some reason. Are we going to play or not? Sagittarius snapped. Some of us are here to win. Lord Iron Mask agrees. Let us battle on the field of playing cards. Fold, Necromortius said, slapping his cards down. Lord Iron Mask is all in, the dictator said, pushing all his chips towards the center. Everyone but Urg folded. I'll see you're all in and raise you. Wait, how do you raise again? Clash of the Titans right there, Sagittarius muttered. Lupin grabbed a cigar and puffed heavily, turning back to Otto. Okay, I'm still hung up on this Esmeralda thing. How'd you bag such a great babe? Mind control ray? Lord Ironmask wishes you to read of them and commence weeping. Full house. Urg scratched his head, shaking loose a host of scattering insects. Does a 10 high beat that? Otto rubbed his temples as he looked at Drew and Tim, both of whom remained fixated on him. She and I simply have a great deal in common, and we've proven we can work together well on crimes. Oh, you're bringing her on crimes? Bad idea, dude, Drew said, raising on the next hand. I tried that with this vampire queen I was dating, and pretty soon she was all, why don't you dress better? You should pack more weapons. Don't date my mom. Blah, blah, nag, nag. First thing I tell a woman is not to ask about my business, Sagittarius said, calling and raising. They just get in the way. Yes, even Lord Ironmask, who needs no love but the caress of cold iron, knows that. Otto called. Each of you is more ridiculous than the last. My love is not some slow-witted placeholder such as you lot seek. She is worthy of a place at my side. Worthy to sit at this table even. 3 jacks. Otto took the pot, and once again finding the others staring at him. Seriously, if you all keep making me guess like this, I'm going to pull out my mental extractor. Lupin shook his head. Otto. It's one thing to get a little action, but don't go falling in love with her. Hit up her best friend when you're bored. That's what I do. See and raise you 20. Sagittarius looked at his cards, betraying no emotion. I hate to agree with the dirty Cajun, but he's right. We're criminals. Love leaves us redeemed or killed. And of the two, I'd pick killed any day of the week. Fold. I think it's romantic, actually, Necromortius said. He looked at his cards and clapped. Ooh, I call. Lord Ironmask might consent to a lover if their countenance was composed of iron. I receive more than an earful about my choices from this one, Otto said, thumbing at Scrap, who merely shrugged. I know what I'm doing, and I hardly need lectures from any of you on such matters. Fold. In my species, the females may then devour the males, so I'm sworn to a life of celibacy, Urg said. Hey, 3 kingy thingies, I'm all in. I'm not sworn to celibacy. It just happens that way when you work with corpses all day, Necromortius said to himself. Too rich for my tainted blood, I'm out. Lord Ironmask folds to fight another hand. Call, said Lupin, smirking at the demon. Let's see what you have there, big guy. Urg flipped over 3 cards, which were indeed kings. Yep, just 3 kings, the demon said. 3 aces, Lupin said, reaching for the pot. Oh wait, I forgot something, Urg said. 1 more king! He flipped over another card, laughing maniacally as fire spewed from his mouth. Fool! Never trust a demon. He has 100 motives for everything he does. Ha 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 ha! Everyone looked on in shock. Drew waited for Urg to begin dragging the chips toward him before casually flipping over 1 more ace. Everyone's shock from the one before was now trumped. I've seen worse plays, Lupin said, leaning back in his chair as he puffed his cigar. But not many. Urg stood up and pointed a crooked finger at the werewolf king. Impossible! I could not have lost. You must have cheated. Uh-oh, Necromortius said, ducking under the table. Lupin now stood as well, a feral look on his face as he stared down the demon. Did you just call me a cheater? The man's eyes turned a pale yellow and his teeth elongated. His clothes tore away as dark brown fur covered his skin, and he took on the visage of a huge wolf. Leaping at blinding speed onto the demon, the pair began to rip at each other, blood, fur, and scales flying in every direction. As they rolled around, knocking over numerous trays and slamming against the walls of the station hard enough to dent them, Scrap looked at Otto. Sir, permission to activate the base defenses? Otto shook his head, smirking. Denied. Activate the one-way force field and continue dealing. We'll let them sort out their aggressions, and perhaps have a decent hand for once. Scrap did as ordered, raising the field just before Urg hurled Drew into the center of the room. The werewolf skidded over the invisible barrier and backflipped onto his feet, beating his chest and howling. Urg took to the air, flame bursting from his mouth. Lord Ironmask will put an end to this. The iron-masked lord stood up and levitated out of the field, waving towards the warring pair. Friends, do not fight. Swear joint fealty to Lord Ironmask. Survive 1 year and receive a free... Before he could continue, both brawlers slammed their fists into opposite sides of his face. Otto looked at the cards and nodded to Sagittarius. Good. Now that the sideshow is in full effect, the real battle can begin. Necromortius stuck his head up from under the table. You mean me? Sagittarius cocked an eyebrow. You engineered that, didn't you? I have to admit, Von Trapezoid, I'm impressed. Your reputation as a bumbler might be overstated. Anyone who puts stock in the word of the masses deserves their fate. Raise 50. Tim looked at the two men, sitting perfectly still, yet circling each other like one-finned sharks in an above-ground pool. He folded. Sagittarius tossed the chips to the center. Call. I was also thinking about your relationship. Oh, thank the heavens. Nary a moment had passed without one of you attempting to meddle in my personal life. I'm just saying. I'm sure Esmeralda seems great now, but women are all the same. Pretty soon she'll be asking to make a few changes. Little ones at first, nothing you'll care about, like the color of the bath towels. Next thing you know, she'll be calling everything you own ours, and you'll be so used to doing what she says, you won't even know how to say no anymore. Then she'll either run your life forever or turn bored because you're no challenge anymore and leave. Otto took the hand, chuckling to himself. Your feeble attempts to psych me out are not as effective as you'd like to think, Jones. Perhaps you should focus on the game instead of my obviously superior abilities at both cards and love. Behind them, Lord Ironmask had joined the fray, firing magic-limbed energy blasts from his fingertips at Lupine, who had his teeth embedded in Urg's right flank. Otto and Sagittarius went back and forth for several hands, mostly playing in silence. As the hour grew late, the scientist was ahead by a hand and a few thousand in chips. Listen, Von Trapezoid, Sagittarius said, cracking his knuckles. I see what you're doing. Your cautious card-counting thing might work well on the others, but not me. Let's make this interesting. One more hand, all or nothing. I shall defile your corpse, shouted Urg. Not if Lord Ironmask defiles yours first. Scrap looked to Otto as he shuffled. Sir, may I recommend we do something about that? I suspect the crazy battle behind serious conversations gag has been run into the ground. Otto nodded dismissively. Yes, very well. Set cannons to maximum stun. Scrap dealt the last hand as he turned on the stung, shocking tasers of universal neural galvanization. Lord Ironmask, his suit highly conductive, fell first, followed by Urg, who toppled onto Drew Lupine. Otto looked down at his cards and nodded, pushing his pile to the center, followed by Sagittarius. Scrap shot cards to Necromortius. No, I'm not. Oh, what the heck. The necromancer shrugged and put his much smaller pile in as well. Beads of sweat ran down the men's heads as they eyed their hands. Since all the money was on the table, there was nothing they could do but flip the cards. Pair of eights, Otto said through gritted teeth. Sagittarius' poker face finally slipped, and he breathed a sigh of relief. 2 tens. I thought I was done for. As the crime lord reached over for the pile, he saw Necromortius flip his cards over in slow surprise. 2 pair? Sagittarius threw his hat on the ground, his mouth agape. I cannot believe this. Why was he even get a hand? Otto gave a smug smile, chuckling to himself. What's so funny? You lost 2. Yes, I knew I could not defeat you. Therefore, I made sure Tim was dealt in as well, thus ensuring your winning hand was spread between the 3 of us. In the end, your consternation matters far more to me than any money I might have gained. Nevertheless, you are a worthy foe, and I look forward to crushing you in the future. Ha! I won! Shouted Necromortius, jumping and tossing his chips in the air. In your face, suckers! No offense, guys. Yeah, Sagittarius said, picking up his hat and shoulder-checking Necromortius on the way out. We'll see what's up next time. Drew Lupine and Urg now carried each other by the shoulder, laughing as they did so. You got a mean right hook, Lupine said. Say, you ever go down to Mardi Gras? Now they have one on the 6th circle of Tartarus, but I hear you guys do it better. Necromortius, carrying the chips in his robes, looked to the door. Well, I'm Urg's ride, so I guess I should go too. But I have to know something first. Otto threw up his hands in aggravation. Since I suppose none of you has any concept of privacy or boundaries, go ahead and ask. You said earlier Esmeralda deserved a spot at the table, but I mean, I've probably heard you say 1,000 times how irrational females are. Those are your words, not mine, by the way. Anyway, what's with the change? Not that I disagree. I'm not like most of these guys with their Stone Age philosophies. Wait, come back! Lord Ironmask shouted as he ran out the door. Lord Ironmask only incinerates you because he loves you. Otto crossed his arms. I may have said women were irrational, but only because they are a subset of humanity, an inherently irrational species. They are no more so than men, as I see it. Necromortius grimaced. Well, if you say so. Anyway, play some chess soon? Yes, send word to Scrap and he'll make the arrangements. Tim, Otto would always think of him as Tim, whatever absurd moniker he chose to call himself, opened a black and purple mouth-shaped portal and passed through before it snapped shut behind him. Though Otto denied it to the others, perhaps he had changed. Certainly the coming of Esmeralda into his life was a momentous occurrence, and it had forced him to reevaluate some of his attitudes. Human behavior was not one of his specialties. For the first time in his life, he was dealing with emotions in a manner other than forcing them down and building something large and destructive. Could the others, then, be right about the dangers of love? Could Esmeralda simply be a trap into which he was walking, as so many others had before? He didn't believe so, but as a scientist, he had to be sure. He walked over to Scrap, who was attempting to wipe demon blood off the walls with a damp cloth and some bleach. Scrap, I require your services. Scrap was silent for a moment before turning to answer. Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I was having so much fun just now, I scarcely heard you. I wish to speak with Esmeralda. Patch me through to her secure line, and I'll take the call in my quarters. Gladly, sir, provided, of course, I can pry myself away from this exciting mass of tangled flesh and viscous fluids. Otto returned to his room and sat down in the floating chair. He brought up the view screen, which blinked in anticipation. He tapped the button, and the screen flickered on. Esmeralda, wearing a bright blue silk bathrobe studded with gems and a towel wrapped around her head, smiled at him from the other side. Hey, handsome, she said, pausing while brushing her teeth with a platinum toothbrush. What's up? I thought tonight was your big no girls allowed poker game. Oh yes, we just finished. Lord, after Lupine and Erg tag teamed the station's bathroom, I'm reasonably sure we'll have to build a more powerful plumber bot. But that's not why I called. I was hoping sometime soon I might see your place of residence. The toothbrush fell from Esmeralda's mouth. She stood in silence for a moment. Is something wrong, my angel of death? No, gotta go, lady trouble. Sorry you understand. Love you, talk to you tomorrow, bye. Esmeralda ended the call, leaving Otto scratching his head. He was about to call her back when the door was blown off the hinges by an energy blast. Might Lord Iron Mask crash on your floor? Far too much mead was quaffed this day. So, thank you. Thank you. Whew. All right, so I guess that's all I'm reading. So I'm going to open it up to questions if anybody has anything to ask. The main characters are Otto Von Trapezoid, who is a mad scientist. He lives on a space station and has an army of robots that do his bidding. And Esmeralda Santa Monica, the Empress of Theives. She has like tons of treasure stored everywhere, and she likes to do everything with style and precision and be as cool as possible. And it's about them kind of first trying to blow each other up, but then falling for each other and trying to blow up the world. Well, the original idea for the book was just something I'd had many, many years ago. And I knew when I had came up with the idea for villains in love, I knew one of them would have to be a mad scientist. I just thought that would be appropriate. And then just the idea of like someone to kind of counteract that, the idea of a thief kind of came into play. And as for how they sort of developed their personalities, I just started with Otto being just an extremely irritable, cranky misanthrope, you know, convinced very much of his own intelligence, but not really good with people. And Esmeralda kind of grew out of the idea of just, you know, it not being enough to just steal money, but also just to be as cool and stylish and adventurous as possible. So, like all of her, everything she does is all built around just style. So they kind of grew out of that. Or did you mean like more how the story itself kind of came into?
Oh, the characters, like the people in here, the Iron Mask.
Oh, I was also playing a lot with sort of analogs of villain types. Like Lord Iron Mask is kind of me making fun of Doctor Doom a little bit. Always referring to himself in third person, but he's like, if Doctor Doom were really, really stupid, you know? Scrap was just a good foil for Otto because he just does all the dry sarcasm. And Meg needed a friend too, so the teen hacker Meg kind of grew out of that, and I just liked her being very peppy and sweet, even though she's very chaotic and destructive at the same time. And Tim the Necromancer will probably be the subject of a future book. He's sort of a minor character in this story, but he'll get his own eventually. Oh, yeah, there's the women in villainy conference they all go to, and Esmeralda gives kind of a speech about like supervillains and like being a woman in the field in a generally male-dominated field. And I hope I did a good job with that. I'll leave that to the readers to decide. But mostly it involves them being, it's that, but with a tinge of being the bad guys. Lord Iron Mask is probably the easiest to write, followed by Urg. They're both dumb characters, just make good comedy. But some of them actually did grow into sort of interesting characters in their own right, like you guys, Halloween Girl shows up at the in the Women in Villainy conference, and she gets her own story eventually, which you've read, but yeah. So I had fun I tried to make every character fun and interesting and likable, and everybody either be funny or appropriately unfunny in some way. No, this book just takes place on its own. I do have plans to tell future stories in the same world. Like again, the story about Tim the Necromancer will be its own thing, but you can read this beginning to end, and that's all you ever read of mine, that's all you need for this. Well, I mean, this book does have a publisher. It's through Curiosity Quills Press, and so anything related to this will probably be through them for at least the foreseeable future. But I'm still kind of learning the ropes of being published, so we'll see. I'll have a better answer for you when I get something else published. Yes. Well, one of the main characters is a super spy named Jake Indestructible, and I didn't get to read anything that he's in, but he's a fun character for me to write too. He's sort of like a combination of Nick Fury and Solid Snake and Popeye the Sailor. I tried to make him a character where, like, one thing I don't like in stories that are often from the villain's point of view is they try to make the heroes look bad so that you sympathize more with the villain, and I've always thought that was a bit of a cop-out. So I decided but I still need to make him funny. So what I decided to do with Jake Indestructible was make it where he was just so over the top and so tough and so heroic that it was just ridiculous. Like, he's the kind of guy who headbutt his way out of a concrete slab because it's just the most manly thing he could do at that exact moment. So I just had fun writing him, so he's really the only major hero in the story, but frankly, he's enough.
He's enough, right?
Yeah.
He's more hero than needs it than required, so it's kind of like all of them smashed together.
Yeah, he's like in chapter 3, which I mentioned him. He did get mentioned a little bit.
It seems like the villains are kind of like they foil each other's plans to where it's like, who needs a hero when you got villains like these,
Yeah, well, it's definitely true that it is definitely true. But one thing I will say is, like, in some of the heists they engage in, especially Otto and Esmeralda later on, because they start working together, do become a lot more competent and successful. As to whether or not they succeed in their goals completely, you'll have to read to find out. But they're not quite as incompetent. I actually struggled with that early on. One thing I was noticing that Otto was just sort of inept. And I was like, I don't want him to be totally inept. So I made it where he was kind of blustery and bungled things through to his myopia, but that he was still a fearsome villain in his own right. And Esmeralda, she does some really awesome, cool misdirections and things like that as well. So I think, like what you've seen doesn't exactly paint them in like the most competent light, but there's more in the story than that. I would love it if Edgar Wright, the guy who did Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz and Scott Pilgrim, that's like my dream director for this. If this ever did get picked up, I like everything that dude's done. So, and I think he just has a good sense of humor and just gets stuff in a way that a lot of other people don't. I had a whole list of actors I would want to play some of these characters, and bear in mind that I do not create these characters with actors in mind. I just make them up and then think about it afterwards. The person I thought would be good for Otto would be, I don't know if any of you know who Daniel Bruhl is. He's like kind of German actor. He was in the movie Rush. he played sort of a weird, off-putting Austrian guy, just like Otto. So I thought that'd be kind of perfect for him. And I kind of like Natalie Morales as Esmeralda. She just is a decently comic actor. I had some others too, but I'm not going to bore you with my IMDb list and thing like that. So.
And you'll be snuck into.
Oh yeah, I'll do the Peter Jackson thing where I'm just like hiding in the background or whatever. Probably the character I drew most easily from is Otto. I'm not quite as socially inept, I hope, and I'm also not as good as a scientist. I'm actually pretty bad at the sciences. Otto makes fun of English majors a couple times in the book, and that was me poking fun at myself a little bit. And I apologize to my biologist friends out there, because he does make fun of biologists a lot. But Otto sort of embodies like my inner grouch and misanthrope, but taken to like the farthest extreme. Like all those things I would never say because I know that that would be a horrible thing to say. It usually comes out of Otto's mouth. So. But they're all me in some ways. I take a little bit of myself and try to put it in as many of them as I can, because it's the best way to care about a character is take something about yourself and that way you can understand that part of them and thus understand them a little bit. Oh, I'm Tim. I suck. I'm not quite as bad as Erg. I'm the guy who's just like, I fold. Yeah, I'm Tim with the cards. That part was definitely drawn from me. The few times I played poker and I'm just atrocious. So. The main thing about writing is that it seems really cool because you have these great ideas going through your head and you want to just get them out there. But writing, and this is not said to discourage people, but it is hard and lonely work, which means you can't just treat it like a lark. You have to commit to it. You have to have a plan, and you have to care about it. And you could do this in any number of ways. You find your own way, your own style. But the most important thing is just the commitment and saying no to things you like doing because you got to get it done. I mean, while I was working on this book, I don't know if I would say to do this, but I'm work a full-time job, and I was sleeping about 3 hours a night while I was writing this. Most of it was just sort of but it was very worth it. I mean, I don't regret a minute of that. Let's see, another piece of advice I'd give you, and this seems like it should be obvious, but read a lot. Read a lot from different writings from different authors and different styles. Don't just read stuff that is your natural inclination. Read stuff outside, because the more influences you have, the more ideas you're drawing from, the more likely it is you'll distill that into something that's sort of uniquely yours. And then beyond that, just you can do it for fun or you can do it for money, but know that they're different things. And either one is okay, but you got to know which one you want to do. Not much. The biggest change, funny enough, was the name. The name was something that we kind of went round and around with a little bit, because my original title for this was Supervillains in Love. And I thought that was sort of just a quick, catchy, like a little bit cheesy sort of title that basically gives away the premise real quick. They ultimately said that they thought it made it sound too much like it was an actual romance novel and that it just wouldn't get the right audience. And they thought Otto Von Trapezoid and the Empress of Theives sounded very pulpy and adventure-y and sci-fi-ish, so we should go with that instead. So that's probably the biggest thing we went with, and I ultimately acquiesced because I figured, well, you guys have been in the business longer than me, I'll trust you. But no, for those of you who care, that was the original title. You now have a piece of trivia you can take to your friends. That's a complicated question. I probably wrote the first 2 or 3 chapters way back in 2011, and I got distracted and went away from it for a while. The writing of it kicked into high gear about June of last year, and I wrote almost all of it in about a span of 4 months. So yeah, though I had written about 5 chapters before that, the remaining 15 were all from June to October of 2014. Like I said, wasn't sleeping. Oh, that was extremely important to me. This is something I wanted to do right. I didn't want this to just be Otto's story. You know, this is Otto and Esmeralda, equal co-stars of the story, and I didn't want her to be second fiddle in any way to Otto. That was important to me. And part of it also, of course, is the fact that Otto starts off as kind of a sexist jerk, you know, and like writing, I mean, you know, the whole scene where he's like reading from his guide is just, there's a part of me that's like, oh God, I hope this people don't think I believe this, you know, that's like, it's obviously the character thinking something dumb, and if Otto has some growth in it, it is that he grows out of that and becomes a little more egalitarian in his views and beliefs. And obviously some of the other villains don't feel the same way, but that's sort of intentional. But I tried to put as many interesting and cool female characters in there as I could, and tried not to have them in the role of that women so often get relegated to in fiction, in comedy, of the eye-rolling straight man. You know, I tried to make them funny in their own ways as well. Like you guys haven't, when you read the book, you'll meet Esmeralda's sister, Catalina. And Catalina is absolutely terrible, but she's a blast to write and very, very funny. And yeah, Jason pointed out the Women in Villainy conference, and I had a lot of fun with that too. And so like I said, it was very important to me to do that right, and I hope I did. You know, I'll leave that to all of you guys to decide, but we'll see. This is the first thing I've attempted on this scale. I have written a lot of other things, like I've written a lot of scripts, and I've written a lot of comic books and things like that, none of which are published, I'm sad to say. Actually, Jason and I spent a lot of years working on trying to start a little comic empire of our own and just writing various things. And I know some of you here have read a lot of those. And that stuff I did care about, and I would like to go back to. But as far as a novel, this was my first real attempt at something this big, and it was, and a lot of the struggle for me was building a structure that worked. And I'm not going to bore you guys with Creative Writing 101 talk about story structure, because you probably go to sleep. But for me, that was the challenge of it, was basically designing it in a way that it would fit together and be readable. It's like the least glamorous but most important thing a writer can think about is the structure of a story. And so that for me was it was a learning process, and I think I did all right. But yeah, the writing of other things did help me develop an ear for dialogue and characterization and stuff like that, trying to be as minimalist as possible, because you never want, granted the book does have a lot of long windy sentences, but that's intentional. But as far as like things that actually come out of a person's mouth, it should be like believable in that sense. So anyway, hope I answered your question and didn't ramble too much.
Well, if there aren't any other questions, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out to support Jesse with his first book. He's going to be here signing them. I know he's already signed a lot of them, but there's been some other people I think that want to get some signed as well.
Yes, indeed. When I looked up from the reading, I was like, oh, there's a lot more people here.